106.5 FM and online. It's the After 5 Guest with Wynne Thomas.
He's back again.
Like a bad penny.
Yeah. It's nice to see him. It's Mark Rees of the Evening Post and his new book, Ghosts of Wales.
Thank you very much, Wynne. It's wonderful to be back. Very appropriate weather there. Murky and fog. That's very ghost weather, isn't it? To talk about ghosts. Yeah.
So, I think I'll ask you this first question, okay? Mm-hmm. Do you believe in ghosts?
Now, I don't know if you know this. That is actually the very first line in the book. Do you believe in ghosts?
It is, yeah.
But
you don't answer it.
I don't. That's my best sort of attempt at being a politician there, by evading the question, because I honestly think it's irrelevant. I think whether you believe in ghosts or not, they're still fantastic stories that whoever reported them did believe. So, I can read a story by Edgar Allan Poe. I don't believe that's true. Still love the story. Whereas I can have someone on the street tell me a story they believe is genuine, which can be just as scary as an Edgar Allan Poe story. And to me, whether you believe or not isn't really the case. So you enjoy them.
I'll try another one with you. So, have you ever seen a ghost?
I have not, no.
So all the ghost programs on TV, then, what do you make of them yourself?
I think some of them are fantastic entertainment. I do not believe for a second that any of them are genuine.
Right.
Because I've done a lot of research. I've a lot of ghost hunts myself.
Yeah.
And the key thing about a ghost hunt is that nothing happens. You can spend all day, all night, you can spend an entire weekend in a haunted place. And if you're lucky, you might pick up a noise, you might pick up a little photo. But when you watch these programs, and certainly some of the American ones, they're being chased around mines by troglodytes and things, and this, and it's just, it makes great viewing. But do I believe it's genuine? No, not for a second, no.
So then, okay, we'll do another one then, see if I can get you to answer this one. Why a ghost book?
The honest reason I wrote it, there's an old saying which I love, which is, when you write a book, you should write the book that you want to read yourself. I went onto, the Amazon and other book sites are available, those kind of places, looking for books on Welsh ghosts in the Victorian age. I couldn't find one. I assumed that meant maybe there weren't many Welsh ghost stories in the Victorian age. So I went digging into the newspaper archives, and it amazed me what I found. I was hoping to find one or two good ghost stories. I found literally hundreds. I had to condense it down to sort of 50 of the best for the book. It was like striking gold in a way. It just amazed me that no one before me had bothered writing about these amazing stories which have been hidden for over a century, and I stumbled on it by accident. So,
and you did lots of research into the Victorian archives for this.
I did. I remember the day I started where I got a big cup of coffee and I thought, I'll sit down, I'll go through a few papers, see what I can find. And before I realised it, it was getting dark outside. The day had just gone. I'd just been so engrossed in it. So I sent my publisher an email, more hopeful than anything, but a little email just saying, look, I think I've stumbled onto something here no one else has done. Would you mind if I did this as a book? And they were just as enthusiastic as I was. They said, go for it. I was able to spend the next, weeks and months rummaging through old Welsh newspapers looking for ghost stories, and not just in the English language. I also went through the Welsh language papers of the time, some of which do contain stories which were not reported in the English papers, which is quite interesting, because I can't claim this, but potentially I might be the first person to ever translate some of these stories into the English language, which, if that's true, that's quite cool.
So the day job is the editor of the What's On bit in the Evening Post, and this as well. So you've done a lot of work in the last couple of years then.
This in no way sort of interferes with my day job. Yes.
It is you have to be busy. You've got your day job and you've got this as well.
I'd finish work, drive home, get all spooky at home at night with the newspapers, or on weekends and bank holidays. And people do think I'm mad, it is a busman's holiday in a way, isn't it? You spend all day writing, and then you go home and you spend all night writing and researching. But, that's what I love to do.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's pick out a couple of bits from the book. I'm not going to do them all, obviously, because there's a lot of stuff in there, but let's try this one. Halloween 1893, whisked away by a hideous apparition.
Whisked away by a hideous apparition. Oh, you're testing me now. You clicked through the right page. Is this the one from Cardiff, or is this the...
It's the one before Cardiff, I think, yeah.
Well, there was great excitement. There's some great Victorian terminology in Amelia Terrace, where the neighbours had been seeing what they described as a hideous apparition, unaccountable peculiar noises we heard in the bedrooms and other parts of the cottage. A peculiar part of the Victorian newspapers is that the journalists writing about this didn't believe a word of it. But it was headline news. It sold papers. It was front page news. So what a strange mix of sort of tongue-in-cheek reporting of what was going on. So, which is why some of it does come across as quite cynical. It was a 4-bedroom house which was being disturbed by ghostly activity, for want of a better word. And one of them was a tall apparition robed in white appeared close by me right before my eyes, one witness said. What I tried to do, what I like about this story in particular, and the reason I included this, is because it was corroborated by multiple witnesses, rather than just one man coming back from the pub saying, oh, I saw a ghost. If you can find a haunting that was reported several times over a period of months or years by different people, that, I'm not saying it wasn't paranormal, but it makes it a bit more interesting than just one person in the dark coming back from the pub seeing a ghost. And that was one where this house was terrorised.
What about a rival to Hamlet's father, a ghost who wanted people to follow it? That was seen by several people as well, wasn't it?
Now, this one I do know well, and I'm glad you chose this one. You didn't catch me out again. And the reason I know this one so well is because it's a Swansea one. While the book is a book of Wales, all of Wales is treated fairly. But obviously, as a local person, the stories from Swansea and Port particularly interested me.
We're going to do a Port one later on as well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. But the ghost which was said to rival Hamlet's father was reported in York Street, which is down sort of by where View Cinema and places are now. And the reason it was described as a rival to Hamlet's father is like in the Shakespearean play, where this doesn't quite work on radio, but if you imagine a Shakespearean actor holding out his arm, holding that skull, doing the alas line, well, this ghost was disturbing a woman in the kitchen. She got a bit scared. It was happening night after night, so she called some of the neighbours round to keep an eye out for the ghost. And one night, she and her neighbours followed the ghost into the garden, who said, dig in that spot. They dug in that spot. That is where they found the skull, which is where it was held up, like that scene from a Shakespeare play. And the one, again, I tried to find something interesting in each of these stories to include them. What really fascinated me with this one is that it was investigated by the police. This wasn't just, some crazy people talking about ghosts. The police investigated because hard evidence of potentially a murder was found if you find a skull and a body in your garden. And the police took away the skull and they kept it in Swansea Police Station, which at the time was in the Guildhall. That was the rival to Hamlet's father, that particular ghost in Swansea.
So just going off the book a minute, but the Victorians seem to be big on seances. Is that right?
They did. It's, I'll try and condense this into 30 seconds really, but it's the Victorian age has been described, and I agree with it, as the golden age of ghosts and the golden age of spiritualism. Now, spiritualism, it was kickstarted in America by two young girls called the Fox sisters, who began communicating, or so they said, with a spirit in their house by tapping and knocking. This caught on like wildfire, spread all across America, winged its way across the Atlantic, landed in London. From London, it spread out across the United Kingdom into Wales. And seances at the time, I mean, again, it's not something that crazy people did. It was something that, members of high society would do. They would say, shall we go to the opera tonight, or shall we have a seance? And they would go and have a seance. It started off quite believable with taps and knocks. By the end of the 19th century, it was less believable. That's when you have mediums, throwing up rivers of ectoplasm and jumping out of cupboards naked, and it got a bit silly.
And the Ouija board?
Ouija board is a brand name, but they certainly used similar devices with letters and numbers, but then the Ouija name was added later by Warner Brothers, I believe, when they mass-produced it.
Oh, Warner Brothers, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Monopoly or Ouija boards, yeah.
Yeah. No, we also, we can say that Wales is a big industrial area. It's it's not as big as it used to be. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Pit of the Ghost is Morva colliery.
Yes.
So they saw ghostly figures underground.
Morva is... Of all the stories I collected, Morva is the one that just had so many accounts connected with it that either everyone working there was delusional or there was something which needed explaining going on there. And what was really peculiar about Morva is that it was the scene of some horrific disasters. I believe the worst mining disaster of the Victorian era happened there when 93 men lost their lives. There were other explosions. There were times when, a lot of tragedy happened there. But the ghost sightings usually occurred before the tragedy. And certainly on the worst account, when 93 men lost their lives, there were some people who didn't go to work that day because they said, look, we've had premonitions. We've seen ghosts of our ex-colleagues, a ghost dog, which was reported there a lot, the ghost dog of Morva. They would see the ghost dog. They would phone in sick the next day, and tragedy would strike. Now, whether that's a coincidence, whether that's clairvoyance, as the newspapers at the time thought it was, whatever you want to call it, but there are some striking coincidences where men did not go to work and avoided explosions which killed a lot of their colleagues.
So, Morva, as Port Talbot, that's sort of Sandfields area, is it, yeah?
It's not far from where Tartar is now, and there is a stone there marking where the Morva colliery would have been.
So it's close to the beach then, is it?
Yes, I wanted to get to it when I was doing my research.
Yeah.
It is Tartar-owned land. You can't just traipse across and go up to it. So you'd need Tartar's permission. But yes, there is a memorial there because, a lot of men lost their lives in some horrible, horrible accidents there.
Even superstition about, stay with Tartar. I know there's a superstition about a wall at the Steelworks in Port Talbot, Tartar, that if it falls down, the Steelworks falls down. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I think that wall, goes back to before Victorian times. But yes,
it's part of the Abbey, is it?
So I believe, yes, and it's connected to the Abbey and to, a familiar ghost sightings there, the monks, which again are said to be connected to the Abbey, and we can see them on the M4 apparently. You can drive on the M4 and see the monks from Margmay Abbey walking along the mountains. But yes, the wall is a very famous one in Port Talbot, and I guess no one's brave enough to find out if it's true or not,
and
really.
There are reports of workers seeing ghosts in Tartar.
Yes, there are, yes. There are, a lot of my family have worked in the Steelworks over the years.
The old British Steel,
who have lots of stories. And I'm sure this book is focused on the Victorian era. I do have plans for different eras, and I think that Steelworks is going to crop up again and again in a lot of these books because there is so much connected with it.
The Victorians love ghost stories, okay? I mean, the most famous ghost story must be Dickens's Christmas Carol. That was the most famous ghost story ever, wasn't it?
It was. I don't think it's any coincidence that some of the reports I found, which were published after Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, do bear a striking similarity to Jacob Marley. So before the Victorian age, ghosts were these things sort of outside in the forests, lurking in Gothic castles, which have been derelict castles.
Yeah.
After Dickens publishes books like A Christmas Carol, all of a sudden, you've got ghosts in your bedroom clanking chains around with nightcaps on, and they're waking you up with a message. Again, quite an important part of it, ghosts with a message. They weren't just there to say boo, they were there to say, look, be nicer to your wife, go to church more often, work harder. But they usually had some, in a weird way, some useful message. As long as you survived the fright of seeing a ghost in your bedroom, it could be quite useful if you actually took their advice on board afterwards.
Okay. And can I ask you, is there a sort of favourite part in that book that you'd liked researching?
I liked the surprises.
Right.
There is one, if I had to single out my one particular one, unfortunately it's not a local one, it took place in Rosset, up in North Wales, not far from Chester, not far from the English border. When I pitched this book to my publisher, one of my actual lines, my exact words were that some of these stories sound like the plot from an episode of a Scooby-Doo cartoon. And I didn't mean literally that there were, gangs of pesky kids driving around in a 60s camper van pulling masks off bad guys. What I meant was that some of the stories and some of the people impersonating ghosts, they weren't the sharpest tools in the box then, and they were often caught in some quite comical ways. Well, in Rosset was being terrorised by a ghost, and the problem they had at the time was there was no outdoor lighting, so the ghost could pop up and scare people and just disappear into the darkness, like that, just gone. One night, he tries to do it on a man on a bike. And he pops up and he goes boo and scares the man on the bike. The man falls off, but the man is ready for him. The man pulls out a gun. Yes, people in the Victorian age used to shoot ghosts with guns. He shoots a bullet at the ghost. Luckily for the ghost, the bullet misses. And the ghost disappears into the darkness. But one of the people waiting for this ghost had their dog with them. And this dog, when the bullet goes off, goes chasing into the darkness after the ghost. And the first real inclination they have, this ghost isn't really paranormal in nature, is when the dog bites the ghost's leg. And the ghost goes, ow, falls to the ground, so the dog can rip the white sheet off, unveiling the villain. And the reason I love that so much is I did actually manage to find my very own Welsh Scooby-Doo, a Scooby-Doo ghost hunting dog who was alive and well in Wales. And yes, if I had to choose one, that is my favourite.
Marvellous stuff indeed. There we are, that's the book, Mark Rees's Ghosts of Wales, Accounts from the Victorian Archives. It's an incredible read, I tell you, it really is detailed and wonderful to read, I was quite brave. I used to read this late at night to do my research. So.
Yeah, I had to research it late at night, and the terrifying ones aren't on the radio. Yeah.
And I've got to say that if you want to meet Mark in person, he's going to be in the Mumbles in the Tabernacle Centre on Saturday, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm having I'm calling it a paranormal party, which is a very fancy way of saying book launch with talks. An hour of ghost stories in Mumbles and Tabernacle Arts Centre on Saturday at 7:30. It's being